right, so the book that I chose is it's called Grit: The Power of Passion and Perseverance by Angela Duckworth. So grit, I mean, it's just that kind of, she defines it as, persevering through like adversity and striving to attain a long-term goal, really sticking to something for, over a year or two, before like sort of venturing off and saying, I quit, this isn't for me, this is too difficult. But instead learning how you can identify how you can get better and end up accomplishing that goal that you set out to achieve for yourself. But there's so many examples in here that, makes me want to run a marathon. But I'm just going to get into a couple details that I thought were really interesting. And the first one is this thing called the mundanity of excellence. And the mundanity of excellence is all about somebody that you see that says, oh, they're so talented, they're divine. This person's just gifted, he's talented, he's natural. She talks about this example where they saw Mark Spitz, who's a famous swimmer. A lot of people were watching him and they go, he's a fish. He's the best. He's divine. He's great. And Angela was there, and she got into this guy, and she said, can you tell me about that? Is it his talent? Is he born with it? Or did he work at it? Like, what is it? And one of the guys said, go read Nietzsche. Nietzsche says, do not talk about giftedness, inborn talents. One can name great men of all kinds who were very little gifted, but they acquired greatness, they became geniuses. They all possess the seriousness of efficient workmen, which first learns to construct the parts properly before it ventures to fashion a great whole. They allowed themselves time for it, because they took more pleasure in making the little secondary things well than in the effect of a dazzling whole. So that kind of ties into this idea that these little things that you don't necessarily see this person working at, these things like showing up at 4 a.m. every day, maybe to like swim laps or work on your form, get in the right sleep, eat in the right things, the little things that anybody can do, sort of the mundane things that nobody kind of receives that recognition for, can lead to excellence. And that sort of divine or natural or talented result, it can be the product of performing these little goals, these low-level goals very well and consistently over a period of time. Those are the things that you can get your vast rewards from. And I think that can be applied in any scenario, not just swimming. That can be, studying, being a PT. It can be being a musician. It can be anything. And that's what I really like about this book. It can be applied in any scenario. But I think the real meat of this is when she talks about how to cultivate grit from within yourself. Let's say like you take that grit scale and it's a little bit lower than you wanted. There's 4 things that I think are important, that she goes into that I found that were really interesting, and they're your interest, developing your interest, finding it, practice, purpose, and hope. So the interest part, she says that if you're having trouble finding your interest, like go out, try different things. But when you do find that moment, when you find what you really love and you find that interest, don't expect to be great at it. Just because you love something doesn't mean that you're going to be great. Not if you don't work at it, not if you don't practice. And practice is it's going to be the next section here. And she talks about this concept of deliberate practice. So say you find something you really love and, you're putting tons of hours into it, but you're not getting the results as fast as you wanted, or you're not getting any, or whatever the case may be. Deliberate practice. She says grittier individuals practice deliberate practice more than people who are less gritty. That's like I'm gonna set a goal for myself, like they call it a stretch goal. So over this sort of period of time, where they're gonna, let's say for example, like I'm gonna go back to swimming, and I'm going to run 8 laps and I'm going to do it in a minute and a half, and I'm going to hold that. And then let's say the next day you want to do it in a minute and 28. And by the end of the 2 weeks, you want to get to some sort of time frame. It's just like, having that direction, setting goals for yourself, making sure that the practice you spend, quality over quantity, that's going to be your best bet. You're going to get, a lot more results that way. The next one is purpose. So finding your why, right? So developing what is it? They say in here, purpose is defined as the intention to contribute to the well-being of others. There's a good example in here that they define your purpose as, okay, so you have three different people in the same job. They're all bricklayers. The one guy says, "Oh yeah, I'm I'm just laying bricks." Like, he's got a job. That's okay. Then the second guy says, "I'm a bricklayer." That says, "Okay, I have a career. Like, I'm making something out of this." The third guy says, "I'm building the house of the Lord." And to him, that's like, he's developed this calling, something that he's going to do and sort of benefit others. Like, he has a purpose. He's found his direction. Great story about this guy who works in the subway, who was he started off very low, kind of cleaning the subway. He ended up being like chief director of the entire subway in New York. And I mean, I think it's 1.7 billion trips a year that he is in charge of, and he's impacting so many lives. And over the course of that ascent, he, went from, "Oh man, like, I don't feel like cleaning this," to like seeing all the pieces, all the little parts. Like, he said that in one scenario he saw this, like, he was just looking at things and he said, "Oh, somebody who's put that drill in or put the screw in there, that's been there for 10 years, and that one intricate piece is a part of this grand scheme that's going to affect all these people, and I'm a part of that now." And he developed that. He went from this idea that, I just kind of have like this job to, if I have a purpose, like, I'm doing this for this amount of people. That's something that I think that we can take, as people that are, as budding PTs. This is, I'm reading this chapter. I'm a student, or we can look at it as, I'm growing as a professional to affect this population, or I'm reading a business chapter, I'm trying to get an A in this class, or I'm looking at developing my own practice to sort of add value to this community. So I think, like, defining your purpose and sort of developing that, she outlines that. I thought that was really interesting in terms of, like, developing your grit and sort of that driving factor behind why you persist and why you persevere in that area. The next one is hope. So there's this concept in there, there's this, I'm sure we've all heard of it by now. It's called, the learned helplessness experiment with Mark Seligman, when, the dogs that are getting shocked and there's nowhere to go, they just sit there and whimper. But there's also this thing called learned optimism, and the power of optimism and optimistic self-talk and saying things that are positive in your head can actually propel you further and power you through setbacks. That learned optimism, they have, like, it's an experiment with rats, and they have these rats at a really young age, and they give them a little bit of shocks, and in one group they have a bar that stops it, but in the other group they don't. And they test them like a year later or I think it's like 5 weeks later, and the one group that had the ability to stop the shocks, they took that option away, but those rats still persisted. They said, "There's a way to get out of this. There's a way for me to stop stop the pain, to get through this." And that concept, I think, I think it's applicable. If you kind of tell yourself, I can get out of this. There's a way for me to get through this. She's shown that optimism, it's a powerful thing. There's another thing that she talks about is a growth mindset. Growth mindset, not as opposed to a fixed mindset. You get into a table here on 182, trying to get somebody to grow. Somebody, you're gonna be a teacher, a mentor to somebody. You want to establish that gritty culture. There's ways to, I think, communicate that. So instead of sort of this fixed mindset idea, that would be things you could say to somebody. Well, at least you tried. Like, that's, other than, you could say that, or you could say, that didn't work. Let's talk about how you approached it and what might work better. So and then there's another example. There's, "Great job, you're so talented." So you're being positive. You're saying you're very talented. But you say, "Great job, what's one thing that you could have done even better?" Another one is, "This is hard, don't feel bad if you can't do it." "This is hard, don't feel bad if you can't do it yet." And there's another one in here, like, "Maybe this isn't your strength. Don't worry, you have other things to contribute. And I have high standards. I'm holding you to them because I know we can reach them together." So these are things, just getting somebody to know that, they can do it, they can get through this, they can grow. rather than just saying, oh yeah, you're here, or you're here, or you're here, that's it. And I think, if we ever get employees, let's say we build our own practice and we want to, establish this culture of growth and perseverance, I think it's important how we communicate things. They talk about it in here. They talk about there's a really good example about the CEO of J.P. Morgan Chase. He says, the way he communicates is a key component of how he gets his employees to follow him and to pursue their goals, with the rigor and grit that he does. I want to kind of end on a couple of examples here in terms of, if we were to open up our own culture, or our own practice or our own business, how would we develop that culture? And there's a lot of examples in here. One of which is there's a coach from UNC, or he coaches the women's soccer team, and he develops this culture. He says that it's not about being the most highly recruited soccer team. He says that there's like 7 or 8 schools that recruit better than him, but when they get here, we kind of mold our players and have them believe, they have that optimism, they have that purpose, they practice deliberately all the time, and he can kind of get people to kind of sort of fall in line that way, and he has them actually read passages from these old sort of scriptures and literature, and it's just every one of them kind of emulates a core value that he wants. And I'm not saying that when we go out to create a business, have people reciting passages to you. I'm just saying that it doesn't matter if you're esteemed, that if we're up and coming, like obviously we're not going to be the top-notch place right off the bat, but I think as an owner, I think it is definitely possible to sort of create that culture where you're going to persevere, you're going to power through, you're going to have that passion and purpose to your business, no matter the case. If if you're having a financial setback or a location issue, then there's a way, and you just got to kind of push through that. I just want to end on Pete Carroll, coach of the Seahawks. She talks to him a lot because he is a very passionate guy. He talks about grit all the time and with his players. There's some really good quotes in here that he says that he advocates for his players. Hold on. Oh, he says, here we go. This is it. I'm going to end on this. Personally, this is what Pete Carroll said. He talked to Angela. He actually recruited Angela to come up there because he read her study about the grit scale. And she actually traveled up there to see Pete. And he said, personally, this is in his autobiography, I have learned that if you create a vision for yourself and stick with it, you can make amazing things happen in your life. My experience is that once you have done the work to create the clear vision, it is the discipline and the effort to maintain that vision that can make it all come true. The two go hand in hand. The moment you've created that vision, you're on your way, but it's the diligence with which you stick to that vision that allows you to get there. And then he talks about getting across to that players is a constant occupation for him. And if we go on to develop our practice and our business, I think that'd be a constant occupation for us too. So Grit, The Power of Passion and Perseverance, awesome book. Read it. It's super good. Yeah, that's about it.